The classified ad was buried on page 7 of the local newspaper, squeezed between used car listings and apartment rentals. Emma Chen had read it 3 times before she even considered circling it with her worn-down pencil. Asterisk ranch hand needed, hard work, remote location, experience preferred but not required. Serious inquiries only. Contact Blackwater Ranch. The phone number was printed in small, practical digits. No flourishes, no promises of good wages or friendly working conditions, just the bare facts, like everything else in Emma's life had become lately. She folded the newspaper carefully and set it on her kitchen table. Through the thin walls of her studio apartment, she could hear Mrs. Rodriguez arguing with her television again, and somewhere down the hall, a baby was crying. The sound of the city pressed in from all sides, car horns, sirens, the constant hum of too many people living too close together. Emma had been in Dallas for 2 years now, ever since graduation. 2 years of temp jobs and rejected applications, of watching her savings account dwindle like water in a drought. Her degree in agricultural science hung framed on the wall, a reminder of dreams that seemed increasingly naive with each passing month. She picked up her phone 3 times before finally dialing the number. Blackwater Ranch. The voice was deep, clipped, not unfriendly, exactly, but not welcoming either. Hi, I'm calling about the job listing, the ranch hand position. A pause. You have experience with cattle. Emma's heart sank. Some. I grew up on a small farm, and I have a degree in agricultural science. I've worked with livestock before, just not on a large scale. Another pause, longer this time. She could hear wind in the background and what sounded like cattle lowing in the distance. You available to start Monday? Emma blinked. Yes I am. Address is 4847 County Road 15, about 40 miles south of Dallas. Housing provided, be there by 6 a.m. The line went dead. Emma stared at her phone, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. But as she looked around her cramped apartment, at the stack of overdue bills on her counter, and the empty refrigerator humming in the corner, she realized she didn't have much choice. The drive to Blackwater Ranch took her through country she'd forgotten existed. The city fell away gradually, concrete giving way to farmland. Billboards replaced by endless stretches of fence line and open sky. Emma's old Honda wheezed up the hills, but it kept going, just like she did. The ranch entrance was marked by a weathered wooden sign and a cattle guard that rattled her teeth as she drove over it. The dirt road stretched ahead for what felt like miles, winding through pastures dotted with black cattle and stands of mesquite trees. In the distance, she could see buildings, a large house, several barns, and what looked like a collection of smaller structures. Emma parked next to a dusty pickup truck and checked her watch. 5:55 a.m. The air was different here, cleaner, thinner, with the smell of grass and earth and something she couldn't quite identify. Freedom, maybe. You, Emma. She turned to find a man watching her from the shadow of the nearest barn. He was tall, lean, with dark hair visible beneath a gray cowboy hat. His clothes were practical worn jeans, a faded work shirt, boots that had seen better days. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were the color of storm clouds, and just as difficult to read. Yes, you must be ... double quotes. She realized she didn't actually know his name. Jackson Cole. He didn't offer to shake hands. You ready? To work? Emma nodded, though her stomach was doing nervous flips. What do you need me to do? Jackson studied her for a moment, taking in her clean jeans and new work boots. The eager expression she was trying so hard to hide. First thing, lose the expectation that this is going to be easy. Second thing, you see that bucket by the barn? Emma followed his gaze to a metal pail sitting in the dirt. It was dented and well-used, the kind of bucket that had seen 1,000 different jobs. Fill it with water from the spigot there, and start washing down the fence rails in the main corral. When you're done with that, come find me. He turned and walked away before Emma could ask any questions. She watched him go, noting the confident way he moved, the way his presence seemed to command the space around him. She'd heard about Jackson Cole during her drive. The gas station attendant had mentioned him when she'd asked for directions. Blackwater Ranch. That's Jackson Cole's place. Good man, but tough, real tough. Lost his daddy a few years back, and the ranch has been struggling ever since. Don't know why anyone would want to work out there. Now Emma was beginning to understand why the job had been so hard to fill. She filled the bucket with water and got to work. The first week at Blackwater Ranch tested every assumption Emma had about hard work. She'd grown up on a farm, yes, but it had been a small operation, a few acres, some chickens, a vegetable garden. This was something else entirely. Jackson ran the ranch like a military operation. Cattle had to be moved, fences had to be mended, equipment had to be maintained. There was always something that needed doing, and Jackson seemed to expect her to know how to do it without being told. You're thinking too much, he said on her third day, watching her struggle to load hay bales onto the back of the truck. It's a hay bale, not a puzzle. Pick it up, put it down. Emma wiped sweat from her forehead and tried again. The bale was heavier than she'd expected, awkward to grip. She managed to get it onto the truck, but not gracefully. Jackson shook his head. "You eat lunch yet?" Emma realized she hadn't. She'd been so focused on keeping up with the work that she'd forgotten to stop. "There's sandwiches in the kitchen of the main house." And Emma, he paused, his hand on the truck door. "Eat, you can't work if you don't fuel up." It was the first hint of kindness she'd seen from him. The kitchen of the main house was a revelation. It was large and well-appointed, with wide windows that looked out over the pastures, and a table that could easily seat 8 people. But it felt empty, like a stage set waiting for actors who would never arrive. Emma found the sandwiches in the refrigerator, thick slices of roast beef on fresh bread, with mustard and pickles. There was a note attached. "For the hands. Help yourself, Maria." She ate, standing at the window, watching the cattle move slowly across the distant pasture. This was what she'd dreamed about in college, when she'd studied agricultural science and imagined herself working on a real ranch. But she'd pictured it differently, friendlier, maybe less lonely. "You settling in okay?" Emma turned to find an older woman watching her from the doorway. She was small and compact, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "You must be Maria. Thank you for the sandwich. It's delicious." Maria smiled and moved into the kitchen with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there. "I keep house for Mr. Cole. Cook, clean, make sure he remembers to eat. It's a full-time job, let me tell you." Emma laughed, the first time she'd done so since arriving at the ranch. "He does seem pretty focused." That's one way to put it. Maria began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "He's been carrying this place on his shoulders for 3 years now, ever since his father died. Used to be a dozen hands working here. Now it's just him, and whoever's brave enough to stick around." "What happened to the others?" Maria paused. In her preparations, Jackson's got high standards, maybe too high. He expects everyone to care about this place as much as he does, and most people, well, they just don't. Emma understood. She'd seen it in Jackson's eyes when he looked out over the ranch, a kind of fierce protectiveness, a love so deep it had hardened into something that could be mistaken for cruelty. "He's not cruel," Maria continued, as if reading her thoughts, "just ... hurting this ranch is all he has left of his family. His father built it from nothing, and Jackson's determined not to let it fail. Problem is, he's trying to do it all himself." Emma finished her sandwich and rinsed her plate in the sink. Through the window, she could see Jackson working with one of the horses in the round pen, his movements patient and deliberate despite the intensity in his posture. "I should get back to work," she said. Maria nodded. "Emma, give him time. There's a good man under all that stubborn pride." Time was something Emma had plenty of at Blackwater Ranch. The days were long and physically demanding, but there was a rhythm to them that she began to appreciate. Up before dawn, work until the sunset, fall into bed exhausted but oddly satisfied. Her small cabin was basic but comfortable, one room with a bed, a kitchenette, and a bathroom that had seen better days, but it was hers, and it was quiet. At night, she could hear coyotes calling in the distance, and the soft sound of wind through the mesquite trees. Jackson remained distant but professional. He gave her tasks and expected them to be completed correctly, and on time. He didn't waste words, but he also didn't criticize unnecessarily. Emma began to understand that his silence wasn't personal, it was just who he was. 2 weeks into her employment, everything changed. Emma was repairing a section of fence in the north pasture when she heard the sound, a low, distressed bellow. That made her blood run cold. She dropped her tools and ran toward the noise, her heart pounding. In a low depression near the creek, she found a cow, lying on her side. The animal was clearly in distress, her breathing labored, her eyes wide with pain. Emma could see immediately what was wrong. The cow was in labor, and something had gone terribly wrong. Without thinking, Emma knelt beside the animal and began to assess the situation. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, feeling for the position of the calf, checking for signs of distress. She'd done this before, on her family's farm, but never alone, and never with stakes this high. The calf was breached. Emma knew she had minutes, maybe less, before both mother and baby were lost. She stripped off her shirt and rolled up her sleeves, then began the delicate work of turning the calf. It was dangerous. One wrong move could kill them both, but doing nothing was certain death. "Easy, girl," she whispered to the cow, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "We're going to get through this together." The work was exhausting and messy, but gradually, Emma felt the calf begin to turn. The cow's breathing became less labored, and then, with one final push, the calf slipped free. Emma cleared the newborn's airways and rubbed its chest vigorously. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the calf took a shuddering breath, then another. "There you go," Emma whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Welcome to the world, little one. What the hell do you think you're doing?" Emma looked up to find Jackson standing at the edge of the depression, his face dark with anger. She'd been so focused on the emergency that she hadn't heard him approach. The cow is in trouble, she said, still kneeling beside the now nursing calf. Breached birth. I had to. You had to. Nothing. Jackson's voice was cold with fury. You should have come to get me. That's a $15,000 animal you were playing around with. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Playing around, she'd just saved 2 lives, and he was treating her like she'd done something wrong. I didn't have time, she said, standing up and facing him. Another few minutes and they both would have died. You don't make those calls. Not on my ranch. Emma felt anger rise in her chest, hot and clean. Your ranch would be down. 1 cow and 1 calf right now. If I'd taken the time to find you. Sometimes you have to act, Jackson. Sometimes you have to trust that people know what they're doing. They stared at each other across the small space, the tension thick between them. The calf nuzzled against its mother, oblivious to the human drama playing out nearby. Finally, Jackson looked away. Get back to the fence, he said quietly. We'll discuss this later. But they never did discuss it. Jackson avoided her for the rest of the week, communicating only through Maria or by leaving written instructions. Emma threw herself into her work with renewed determination, but the joy had gone out of it. She was ready to quit when Maria knocked on her cabin door Friday evening. He wants to see you, the older woman said. Main house, study. Emma found Jackson standing behind a large wooden desk, staring out the window at the pasture where the cow and calf she'd saved were grazing peacefully. He looked up when she entered, and she was surprised to see something that might have been shame in his eyes. Sit down, he said. Emma remained standing. If you're going to fire me, just do it. I don't need a lecture. Jackson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. My father died trying to save a horse, he said. Stupid, stubborn animal got spooked during a storm and ran into the barn. Roof beam came down, trapped them both. Dad could have gotten out, but he wouldn't leave the horse behind. Emma felt her anger begin to drain away. I found them the next morning, Jackson continued, both dead. And all I could think was, if he'd just been more careful, if he'd just thought before he acted. Jackson, I was wrong. The words seemed to cost him something. About the other day, you did the right thing. I know you did. It's just, this place has taken everything from me. I can't lose anyone else to it. The honesty in his voice broke something open in Emma's chest. She sank into the chair across from his desk, suddenly understanding so much more about the man in front of her. I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly. Not unless you fire me. Jackson met her eyes. Maria said, you grew up on a farm. That you know about livestock. A small farm. Nothing like this. But yes, I know livestock. He nodded slowly. I'd like to offer you a promotion. Livestock supervisor. It means more responsibility, more decisions. It also means I have to trust you to make the right ones. Emma felt tears threaten behind her eyes. Jackson, I think about it, he said. You don't have to answer now. But Emma was already nodding. Yes, I'll do it. For the first time since she'd arrived at Blackwater Ranch, Jackson Cole smiled. Spring came early that year, painting the pastures in shades of green that Emma had never seen before. The ranch came alive with new calves and fresh growth, and Emma found herself busier than she'd ever been in her life. The promotion had changed everything. Jackson began treating her as a partner rather than just another hired hand. They worked together to plan breeding schedules, to rotate pastures, to make the 1,000 small decisions that kept a ranch running. Emma discovered that beneath his gruff exterior, Jackson was brilliant, a natural rancher with an intuitive understanding of land and animals that couldn't be taught. You see how they're clustering near the creek? Jackson pointed to a group of cattle in the eastern pasture. They were standing together, working on something with an intensity that spoke of trouble. Emma shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun. Something's wrong with the fence. Wire's probably down. We should check it. They rode out together. Emma, on a steady mare, named Dolly, and Jackson on a big gelding called Rex. The horses moved with the easy confidence of animals who knew their job, and Emma found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride. The fence was indeed down. A tree branch had fallen across the wire during the previous night's storm, creating a gap large enough for cattle to wander through. But the animals hadn't strayed. They were simply standing there, looking at the opening with mild interest. Smart cows, Emma observed. They know where home is. Jackson dismounted and began examining the damage. Good grass here, fresh water. Why would they leave? Emma helped him clear the branch and begin repairs on the fence. It was comfortable work, the kind of task that allowed for easy conversation. Over the past few months, she'd learned that Jackson was actually quite funny. When he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, Emma, he said as they worked. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really take this job? I know it wasn't the money. Emma paused in her work, considering the question. You want the honest answer? I always want the honest answer. I was drowning in Dallas. Had been for 2 years. I kept thinking that if I just tried harder, worked more hours, sent out more applications, something would change. But it never did. I was just stuck. Jackson nodded. And now, Emma looked Out over the pasture, at the cattle, moving slowly through the grass, at the endless sky stretching above them. Now I wake up every morning knowing exactly what I need to do. It sounds simple, but it's not. It's the first time in my life that I've felt useful, I guess, like I belong somewhere. They finished the fence repair in comfortable silence. As they mounted their horses for the ride back, Jackson spoke again. For what it's worth, I can't imagine this place without you now. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Emma felt something shift in her chest, something that had been building for months without her quite realizing it. Summer brought its own challenges and rhythms. The days were longer, the work harder, but Emma thrived in the heat and dust. She'd developed a deep tan and muscles she'd never had before. More importantly, she'd developed confidence. Jackson had begun trusting her with major decisions, which pastures to use, when to move cattle, how to handle difficult animals. Emma found that she had good instincts for the work, and more importantly, she loved it. "You're different," Maria observed one evening as they prepared dinner together in the main house. It had become a tradition, the three of them eating together at the end of the day, sharing stories and plans for tomorrow. "Different how?" Emma asked, stirring a pot of chili. "Happier, stronger, like you found something you didn't know you were looking for." Emma glanced toward the study, where Jackson was going over financial records. "I guess I did." Maria followed her gaze and smiled knowingly. "He's different too, you know, lighter somehow, laughs more." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. Over the past few months, her relationship with Jackson had evolved into something she couldn't quite name. It was more than professional but less than romantic, a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. But lately, she'd begun to notice other things. The way Jackson's eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he stood just a little closer than necessary when they worked together. The way her heart sped up when he smiled. "Maria," she said quietly, "has he ever, since his father died, has he dated anyone?" Maria shook her head. "Haven't been many opportunities out here. And Jackson's not the type to leave the ranch for recreation. Too much work to do." Emma nodded, understanding. Jackson's dedication to Blackwater Ranch was both admirable and isolating. He'd sacrificed everything, including his personal life, to keep his father's dream alive. "But Emma," Maria continued, "I've worked for the Cole family for 15 years. I watched Jackson grow up, watched him take on more and more responsibility. I've never seen him as content as he's been these past few months." That evening, after Maria had gone home and the dishes were washed, Emma found Jackson sitting on the front porch of the main house. It was something he did sometimes, just sitting quietly, watching the sun set over his land. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Jackson gestured to the chair beside him. "Course not." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to deep purple. In the distance, cattle were settling down for the night, and somewhere, a coyote called to its pack. "I've been thinking," Jackson said eventually. "About what?" "About expanding the operation. Maybe getting into breeding quarter horses along with the cattle. There's good money in it, if you know what you're doing." Emma turned to look at him. "Do you know what you're doing?" Jackson smiled. "No, but I know someone who might." "Jackson, I don't know anything about breeding horses. You know animals, you know land. The rest you can learn." He paused. "That is, if you're planning on staying around." The question hung in the air between them. Emma realized it was the first time either of them had directly addressed the future, and what her role in it might be. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. "This is home now." Jackson nodded, but Emma could see relief in the set of his shoulders. "Good, because I've got some ideas I'd like to run by you." They talked until, well after dark, discussing plans and possibilities, dreams that felt achievable for the first time in either of their lives. Emma found herself caught up in Jackson's vision for the ranch, his quiet passion for building something lasting. As they finally prepared to part ways for the night, Jackson caught her arm gently. "Emma, thank you for everything. I know I haven't been the easiest person to work with." Emma looked up into his storm gray eyes and felt her breath catch. Jackson, but he'd already released her arm and stepped back. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be another long day." Emma watched him walk back into the house, her heart pounding. She wanted to call after him, to say the words that had been building in her chest for months. But fear held her back. Fear of changing something that was already perfect. Fear of losing what they'd built together. The moment that changed everything came on a Tuesday in late August. Emma was working in the main corral, separating calves that were ready for weaning. When she heard the sound of an approaching vehicle, she looked up to see an expensive black SUV pulling up to the main house, dust swirling in its wake. Two men in suits got out, looking completely out of place on the working ranch. Emma could see Jackson emerging from the barn. His expression, already guarded, she couldn't hear the conversation from where she stood, but she could read body language well enough. The men were animated, gesturing broadly. Jackson stood with his arms crossed, his posture defensive. After several minutes, they handed him some papers and got back in their SUV. Emma finished her work quickly and walked over to where Jackson stood reading the documents. His face was pale beneath his tan. Jackson, what's wrong? He looked up at her, and Emma saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Defeat. Developer wants to buy the ranch, he said quietly. Made an offer I can't refuse. Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet. What do you mean, you can't refuse? Jackson handed her the papers. I'm 3 months behind on the mortgage. Banks threatening foreclosure. These guys are offering enough to pay off all the debts and still have money left over. Emma scanned the documents, her heart sinking with each line. The offer was substantial, but it came with a condition. The buyers wanted to develop the land into a housing subdivision. Blackwater Ranch would cease to exist. You're not seriously considering this, she said. Jackson laughed bitterly. What choice do I have? I've been bleeding money for 3 years. Emma, I can't keep this place running on determination alone. But this is your home, your family's legacy. My family's legacy is debt and broken dreams. Jackson's voice was harsh with pain. Maybe, it's time to accept that some things just aren't meant to last. Emma felt panic rising in her chest. Jackson, no, we can figure this out. There has to be another way. Like what? I've tried everything. Bank loans, investors, cutting costs to the bone. Nothing works. I'm not my father, Emma. I can't make miracles happen. The defeat in his voice broke Emma's heart. This was the man who'd taught her the meaning of dedication, who'd shown her what it meant to fight for something you believed in. To see him ready to give up was devastating. Give me the papers, she said quietly. Emma, just give me the papers. And give me 24 hours. Jackson studied her face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that sometimes the answer isn't about making miracles happen. Sometimes it's about asking for help. That night, Emma drove back to Dallas for the first time since she'd started working at Blackwater Ranch. The city felt alien now, too bright, too loud, too crowded. But she had work to do. She spent the night in her old apartment, which she'd been keeping as a backup plan, making phone calls and sending emails. She reached out to professors from college, to agricultural extension agents, to anyone she could think of who might have connections in the world of sustainable farming and ranch management. By morning, she had 3 potential investors interested in learning more about Blackwater Ranch. By afternoon, she had appointments set up for the rest of the week. When she returned to the ranch Wednesday evening, Jackson was waiting for her on the porch. Where have you been? He demanded. Maria said you'd gone to Dallas, but you didn't say why. Emma climbed the porch steps slowly, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. I went to find you some investors. Jackson stared at her. What? I made some calls. Reached out to people I know. In sustainable agriculture, there's a growing market for grass-fed beef, for ethical ranching practices. You've got something here. Jackson, 6,000 acres of prime grazing land, a established herd, facilities that just need some updating. It's exactly what these investors are looking for. Emma, you can't just set up 3 meetings. For this week, they want to see the operation. Look at the books. Talk about potential partnerships. Emma sat down in the chair beside him, suddenly feeling the weight of what she'd done. I hope you're not angry. Jackson was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Why would you do this? Why would you risk everything for a place that might not even survive? Emma looked out over the ranch, their ranch, and felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. Because this place isn't just your family's legacy anymore. It's mine too. And I'm not ready to let it go without a fight. Jackson reached over and took her hand, his fingers rough and warm against hers. Emma, double quotes, I know it might not work. She continued, I know these investors might take one look and decide we're not worth the risk. But we have to try, because giving up isn't an option. Not for me. Jackson squeezed her hand gently. What happens if it doesn't work? If we can't find the money? Emma met his eyes. Then we'll figure out something else. But we'll do it together. The first investor arrived Thursday morning, a woman in her 50s named Catherine Walsh, who specialized in sustainable agriculture ventures. She spent 2 days at the ranch, walking the property, examining the cattle, asking detailed questions about operations and profitability. Emma found herself serving as tour guide and advocate, explaining their practices and their vision for the future. She talked about the quality of their grass-fed beef, about the potential for agritourism, about the growing consumer demand for ethically raised livestock. Jackson was quieter, letting Emma take the lead, but answering technical questions with the depth of knowledge that came from a lifetime on the land. Emma could see Catherine warming to him as he talked about soil management and cattle genetics with passion and expertise. You've got something special here, Catherine told them as she prepared to leave Friday afternoon. It needs investment, infrastructure, improvements, marketing, probably some additional staff. But the foundation is solid. Emma held her breath. I'd like to propose a partnership, Catherine continued. I provide the capital for improvements and expansion. You provide the expertise and the land. We split profits based on investment ratios. Emma looked at Jackson, trying to read his expression. He was studying Catherine with the same intensity he brought to evaluating cattle. "I'll need to see the specifics," he said finally. "Terms, timeline, expectations." Catherine smiled. "Of course, I'll have my lawyers draw up a preliminary proposal. You should have it by Monday." After she left, Emma and Jackson walked out to the main pasture together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and the cattle were moving slowly toward the water troughs. "So," Emma said, "what do you think?" Jackson was quiet for a while, watching his cattle. "I think I've spent so long trying to do everything myself that I forgot there might be another way. Is that a yes?" Jackson turned to look at her, and Emma saw hope in his eyes for the first time in weeks. "That's a maybe, which is better than I had yesterday." They had 2 more investor meetings that week, both promising. By the following Friday, Jackson had 3 solid offers to consider. Emma could hardly believe it had worked. "You saved the ranch," Maria told her as they prepared dinner Friday night. "You know that, right?" Emma shook her head. "Jackson saved the ranch. I just made some phone calls." "You did more than that, and you know it." Maria's voice was gentle, but firm. "You showed him that he doesn't have to carry everything alone. That's not a small thing." Emma. That evening, Jackson asked Emma to take a walk with him. They headed toward the creek, following a path they'd worn with their boots over the months they'd been working together. The air was cooling with the approach of fall, and the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night followed them. "I've made my decision," Jackson said as they reached the creek bank. Emma's heart clenched. "And Catherine's offer is the best. Fair terms, reasonable timeline, and she understands what we're trying to do here." He paused. "But Emma, there's something I need to ask you." "What?" Jackson stopped walking and turned to face her. In the fading light, his eyes were serious. "The partnership includes provisions for hiring additional staff, expanding operations. Catherine wants to offer you the position of ranch manager, full partnership stake, decision-making authority, the works." Emma stared at him. "Jackson, it's what you deserve. You've earned it, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather have as a partner." Partner. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that went beyond business arrangements. "What about you?" Emma asked quietly. "What would your role be?" "Operations manager, head of livestock, basically what I'm doing now, but with someone to share the load." Jackson's voice grew softer. "Someone I trust completely." Emma felt tears prick behind her eyes. 6 months ago, she'd been a failed temp worker living in a studio apartment, wondering if she'd ever find her place in the world. Now she was being offered a partnership in something that mattered, something that would last. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." Jackson's smile was brighter than the setting sun. "Good, because I already told Catherine you'd accept." Emma laughed, sudden and joyful. "You were that confident? I was that hopeful." They stood by the creek as full darkness settled over the ranch, talking about plans and possibilities, about the life they would build together. Emma found herself thinking about the classified ad that had brought her here. Bare bones, no promises, just hard work and remote location. It had been the best decision of her life. "Emma." Jackson's voice was quiet, uncertain. "Yeah, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have said months ago." Emma's heart began to beat faster. "What?" Jackson reached for her hands, his touch gentle but sure. "I love you. I've been in love with you since that day you saved the calf. Maybe before that. I know it complicates things, and if you don't feel the same way," Emma silenced him with a kiss, pouring months of unspoken feelings into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been scared to say it, scared to change what we have." "What we have is perfect," Jackson said, "but what we could have, that might be even better." Emma looked around at the ranch, their ranch, at the land they would nurture together, the life they would build. The job nobody had wanted had given her everything she'd never dared to dream of. "Jackson," she said, when do we start?" He kissed her again, soft and sure under the star-filled sky. "We already have." The cattle lowed softly in the distance, and somewhere a coyote called to its pack. The night wind rustled through the mesquite trees, carrying the scent of grass and earth, an endless possibility. Emma Chen had found her home at last, in a place she'd never expected, with a man who'd shown her the meaning of true partnership. Blackwater Ranch would not only survive, it would thrive, and Emma would be there to see it happen, would help make it happen, for all the years to come. Sometimes the best things in life came disguised as the jobs nobody wanted. Emma smiled against Jackson's lips and knew she was exactly where she belonged.